Pennsylvania has been on my radar and not for the steelworkers. I noticed a couple of newsworthy reports worth talking about. Two young men, aged 18 years old, were caught engaging in grooming and sexual exploitation of minors. While these factors are the same, each case is different. Let's break down the optics and why I discovered I'm not surprised and why you won't be either. The first case I want to address is about Matthew Fisher, age 18, from Bangor, Pennsylvania. According to headlines, FBI captures man accused of cutting and sexually abusing girl 13 moments before they plan to jump off hotel roof, and California girl allegedly targeted by Pennsylvania man linked to self-harm ideology. There are a few key details regarding this case that I will highlight further in my commentary.
As I was conducting my research for this commentary, I was able to locate this article from the United States Attorney's Office. Pennsylvania man arrested at Castiac Motel, federally charged after grooming minor victim into engaging in acts of self harm. The article goes on to say that a Pennsylvania man has been arrested and federally charged after grooming a girl who recently turned 13 years old to send him sexually explicit material of herself and images of self harm over the internet, a pattern of abuse consistent with nihilistic violent extremists NVE ideology that culminated in law enforcement rescuing her at a Santa Clarita Valley motel. Matthew Edward Fisher, 18, of Bangor, Pennsylvania, was arrested late Friday in Castiac and is expected to make his initial appearance this afternoon in United States District Court in downtown Los Angeles. He is being federally charged and, if found guilty, will receive a penalty of 30 years in federal prison. Now, I was doing my due diligence here and, just reading. And I was thinking about the situation that I will be talking about next, about the next gentleman out of out of Pennsylvania. And I couldn't help but to um, land here, like I said, with this article on it. I'm going to go into some more detail. It says here on February 10th, the victim's mom contacted the FBI because she was concerned that her daughter was being encouraged to harm herself by someone named Matthew, which she met online. Now, I am going further into the article. On February 20th, Fisher traveled to Los Angeles to engage in sexual acts with the victim. On that day, he met her near her home and took her to the motel in Castiac. When law enforcement arrived, they found condoms, a knife, lubricant, razor blades, bloody tissues, and a boarding pass from his Philadelphia to Los Angeles flight. And they also found a Faraday bag, which is commonly used to block electronic signals. The victim told law enforcement that Fisher and she had engaged in sexual conduct and that he used a knife and was repeatedly cutting her. So, through the investigation, they uncovered that Fisher was involved with the NVE ideology, which is the nihilistic violent extremist ideology. And it goes on to say that the complainant details the nature of NVEs, including 764, a group whose members are known to the FBI to engage in criminal conduct within the United States and abroad in furtherance of political, social, or religious goals that derive primarily from a hatred of society at large and a desire to bring about its collapse by sowing indiscriminate chaos, destruction, and social instability. NVEs often target vulnerable individuals, including minors, and frequently use social media platforms to share child sexual abuse material and gore material or to groom victims towards committing acts of violence. NVE and their members frequently extort or blackmail victims into complying with NVE demands, which vary but may include self mutilation, online and in person sexual acts, harm to animals, sexual exploitation of siblings and others, acts of violence and threats of violence, suicide, and murder. The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is comprised of various agencies, including the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, the Los Angeles Police Department, and California Highway Patrol, is investigating the matter. Assistant U.S. Attorney Colin S. Scott of the National Security Division and Brandon E. Martinez Jones of the Mayor Crime Section are prosecuting this case. So, what I'm highlighting here is the very definitive NVE ideology, which is a set of ideology that gets its victims to harm themselves. Keep that in mind as we move forward. All right, part two. Zachariah Meyers out of Peterstown, Pennsylvania. So, 18-year-old high school senior Zachariah Myers faces up to 300 felony charges after police accuse him of operating a large scale criminal network involving catfishing and sextortion. Since seeing this, those 300 counts have been dropped down to 64 counts, and there is still a lot to be said. But let's go on with this article. At least boys age 14 to 17 were allegedly lured into Meyer's scheme to send him nude photos and sex videos, which he used to blackmail the minors. Myers was charged with trafficking in minors, sexual extortion, unlawful conduct with a minor, distribution of child sexual abuse material, criminal use of a communication facility, and more following his arrest. He remains in Washington County Jail after the judge in his case denied bail, deeming Myers a flight risk and a danger to the community.
Zachariah Myers' charges were taken from 304 down to 67. And while the DA says it looks like they eliminated some of those charges, he says they did not. They just consolidated them. And he tells me this investigation is ongoing and additional charges could be coming.
The crimes speak for themselves.
When 18-year-old Zachariah Myers left the courtroom after waiving his preliminary hearing, he was silent.
I mean, they're horrific and they're widespread for a period of time.
The DA says while the number of charges changed, each crime and each victim's story remains intact. And the former Peters Township class president was headed back to jail despite his attorney's attempt to get the teen bail.
He's in jail as an 18-year-old kid. That's not a place where anybody should be, let alone an 18-year-old kid. And it goes to the factors of, is he a danger or is he a flight risk? I argued in court today he couldn't rent a car if he wanted to.
Defense attorney Lyle Weaver says his client was born and raised in Peters and would have agreed to conditions that keep him offline since the crimes he's charged with are centered there. Myers is accused of creating fake social media profiles and coercing boys in his school into sending explicit images. Myers is charged with trafficking, child pornography, and sexual extortion. The DA, though, told the judge the teen is a danger to society.
Well, because, I mean, everybody can get on the internet. I mean, access to electronics is, you can't, how do you manage that and or supervise that? And this case is exactly that. I mean, he had unlimited access to electronics and and he's victimized a lot of people, juveniles, and we don't want that to happen anymore.
Myers is due back in court next month for formal arraignment. His attorney says he is looking at ways to again ask for bail. Covering Washington County from Peters Township, Marcy Cipriani, Pittsburgh's Action News 4.
So, when this story first came across my timeline, just due to the optics, I knew this was a white boy. And I was absolutely not surprised because the attorney's statements are completely what they should be for him to be a defense attorney, but they're also a little inflammatory. There is another clip of this attorney smirking and almost looking like he wants to laugh at the question or at the situation. I don't know, but I was very off put and thought it was a very haughty response to something like this. And he's arguing that this is just a kid. Meanwhile, he's 18 years old. I want to highlight how the attorney has said he's in jail as an 18-year-old kid. That's not a place where anybody should be, let alone an 18-year-old kid. An 18-year-old kid who is being charged with trafficking child pornography and sexual extortion, but he's a kid. So, Reddit to the rescue, because I was looking for a picture of this guy. I wanted to make sure I was right in my assumption, and I was. So, I'm going to take a little bit of time and read the comments from the Redditors who have commented here. The first one says, "Dude is 18, no juvie, detention for him." Another commenter says, "Oh, I'm sure his lawyers will tell us all about how he's a good kid with his whole life in front of him and who they wouldn't want to take that away from him." Another Redditor, "Jesus, this guy wasn't just a kid, just sexting with a classmate like some stories you hear. He is an insanely manipulative and abusive predator. Good on whoever finally got the courage to report him and all the victims for coming forward." And this was one of my more favorite comments. "Yeah, he was the class president and a student athlete. I guarantee if he wasn't caught now, he would have ended up as some high powered CEO or politician." Hmm. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. So I suppose the point of this video is to highlight that these young men are both from Pennsylvania. They're both 18. They both had some sort of inappropriate sexual contact with a minor. One of them is just a kid who has his whole life ahead of him, and the other one is an NVE, a nihilist, violent, extremist, ideologist person. I somehow don't see how these crimes don't compare, especially seeing as how they both fit under the same umbrella. Those boys aged 14 to 17 were encouraged into self harm just as much as that young 13-year-old was. So, explain to me, what is the difference between these two? It seems like to me they both targeted minors. They both use social media to share sexual abuse content. And they both use grooming tactics to get these victims to do what it was they wanted to do. I don't understand how one of them is just a kid who has his whole life ahead of him, and yet the other one engaged in nihilist, violent, extremist ideology. How do these two differ? Make it make sense, but I'm not surprised. I am